manages to jump over the final barrier, which has been put in the way of the retreating army, an enormous barrier of Hollywood, or prickly. And he, who's a good horseman, jumps this 6-foot-high obstacle and makes it through. 10 other horsemen chase him towards Jalalabad. He fires his gun at the first lot. When he's exhausted that, he throws the pistol at another. He breaks his sword on the third. He finally gets a sword cut in his head, but he has a rolled-up copy of Blackwood's magazine in his cap. It's always good to keep your books and your magazines with you on these occasions. Strong recommendation for going to the bookshop afterwards, putting it under your cap just in case on your way home something should happen. And he makes it alone into the gates of Jalalabad, one man of the 18,000 who had left. A young officer called Thomas Seaton is on the walls of Jalalabad. And he describes in his memoirs how that night lamps are put up on the turrets and bugles blown so as to try and attract in any last stragglers that may have been still hiding in the villages or the mountains or the caves. But no one comes. A strong wind was blowing from the south, which sent the sound of the bugles all over the town. The terrible wailing sound of those bugles I will never forget. It was a dirge for our slaughtered soldiers, all naked, covered with large gaping wounds. As the day advanced, several poor wretches of our Hindustani camp followers and sepoys who had escaped the massacre made their appearance from behind rocks or within caves, where they'd taken shelter from the murderous knives of the Afghans and the inclemency of the climate. They had been stripped of all their possessions, and few could crawl more than a few yards on their hands or knees, being frostbitten in the feet. Here Johnson, another of the hostages, found 2 of his servants. One had his hands and feet frostbitten, and he had a fearful sword cut across one hand and a musket ball in his stomach, while the other had his right arm completely cut through to the bone. Both were utterly destitute of covering and had not tasted food for 5 days. Wounded and starving, they'd had to set fire to the bushes and grass and huddled all together, naked, to impart warmth to each other. Subsequently, we heard that scarcely any of these poor wretches escaped from this defile, and that driven to extremes of hunger, they sustained life by feeding on their dead comrades. So scenes of unbelievable horror. The next year, the British add to this horror by sending in the Army of Retribution. And they go back on this road and see in the spring the skeletons of the people who've been killed the year before. Some were mere skeletons, wrote one officer. Others were in better preservation. The hair was still on their heads, and their features were perfect, although discolored. Their eyes had evidently been picked out by birds of prey, which, while wheeling in endless gyrations above my head, seemed to be considered me an intruder in their domain. On turning the corner of a large rock, where 5 or 6 bodies were lying heaped together, a vulture, which had been banqueting on them, hopped carelessly a little distance, lazily flapped its huge wings, too indolent to fly. I turned away from this sickening sight with a sad heart. But again, as is so characteristic of so many Western interventions in Afghanistan, the British then just bomb Kabul, burn down Shah Jahan's great bazaar, lay waste to the countryside around it, destroy all the trees, and then withdraw, leaving the country a wasteland. Mirza Atta writes, Afghanistan is the land of hawks, but India and its sepoys come from the land of the carrion crows. It is said that the English entered Afghanistan a second time merely to free the English prisoners and hostages, spending lakhs and lakhs to bribe the Afghans into allowing them passage, leaving thousands more dead behind them. But they had hoped to establish themselves in Afghanistan to block any Russian advance. But for all the treasure they expended and for all the lives they sacrificed, the only result was ruin and disgrace. If the English had been able to keep Afghanistan, would they ever have left a land where 44 different types of grape grow, and other fruit as well, apples, pomegranates, pears, rhubarb, mulberries, sweet watermelon, muskmelon, apricots, peaches, and ice waters cannot be found anywhere in the plains of India. The Indians, wrote Atta, know neither how to dress nor how to eat. God save me from the fire of their dal and their miserable chapatis. So the British Army goes back, and the book closes in 1844 with the Tsar, whose dispatch of Vitkovich, 4 years earlier to help start the conflict, coming to stay with Queen Victoria at Windsor Castle, underlining the farce of the war. The gyrations of politics have changed, and together it's now the Russians and the British who jointly present medals to the maimed survivors at a Windsor Castle tea party, as the regimental brass band plays in the bandstand. But it's only a temporary respite. Even as the ceremony is taking place, Catholics and Greek Orthodox priests are clashing in the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, beginning a chain of events which will lead to the Crimean War, the next great war between Britain and Russia. As Kipling has his heroes say at the end of Kim, when everyone is dead, the great game is finished, not before. So last year, I went back and retraced the route of the retreat. I thought you can't write a book like this unless you actually see the place on the ground. The trouble is that the Gundamuk, where the last stand took place, and the second half of the retreat is deep now within Taliban territory. And I was eventually set up with a local leader called Anwar Khan Jagdalik, who was a fabulous character. He'd been the captain of the Afghan wrestling team in the Olympic wrestling team in the 1960s, and was this huge mountain of a man who'd later been a Hezb Islami Mujahideen leader. And he took me with all his guys in pickups down the route through the Kut-Kabul Pass. As we drove, he said proudly how it had been his ancestors who'd been responsible for finishing off the British. They forced us to pick up guns to defend our honor, he said, so we killed every last one of those bastards. This didn't actually stop him sending his children to Northolt in the North London for security, where they were currently at school. So we tried to get through to Gundamuk, where the famous last stand, many of you will know that famous picture of this ring of British soldiers with their bayonets as the Pathans close in, the last stand of the 51st at Gundamuk. And this is where I was trying to get to, but we stopped at Jigdalik, where the Holly ambush, the Hollywood blockade, which Bryden had to jump over on his horse. We had to stop there. This was Jigdalik's own village, and being Afghans, the full Afghan hospitality was rolled out. They killed a sheep, they grilled it. We were there for hours eating these delicious melons and all the rest of it, put out carpets in an apricot orchard. And by the time that we'd finished this enormous meal, it was 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and it was deemed too late to risk the road, the final bit of the road to Gundamuk. So rather disappointingly, we had to go back to the main road and head on to Jalalabad that way. On arrival, we discovered that it had been just as well that we hadn't stopped our appetites and that we had indulged ourselves with quite such gluttony on this feast for 5 hours, because that day had been exactly the day, as chance would have it, that the Afghan government had come to burn the poppy crop in Gundamuk. They'd done it the previous year. They'd burnt the poppy crop. They'd promised compensation to the villagers so they could plant something else. Of course, somebody at some point in the bureaucracy had taken the money. The villagers never got it. So the villagers warned if they did it a second time, they would resist. So this time, they planted poppy. No money came. The government came to destroy it. This time, the Taliban had been called in. And there had been an enormous firefight in Gundamuk that morning. And 19 police pickups had been destroyed. And about 100 people taken hostage. And had we turned up at 4:30 in the afternoon, if we hadn't been so greedy, we would, I think, have been assumed to have been the cavalry coming and got a rather warmer reception than we were planning on. But as chance would have it, the villagers from Gundamuk, the elders, came into Jalalabad the following morning to negotiate the hostages, so they had a bargaining card to pay. So a big jirga was assembled above the airport in Jalalabad. And I went with Anwar Khan to talk to the elders of Gundamuk. And we had this rather strange meeting, this jirga taking place above the airport with Predator drones taking off from Jalalabad airport at exactly the site that Bryden had ridden into the city on his pony all those years before. And I talked to the elders about the similarities and their memories of the first Afghan war. And they said, whoever comes to Afghanistan, they will meet the same fate as Burns, McNaughton, and Dr. Bryden. What was interesting was that they all knew the names. Names long forgotten in Britain were common currency among the Afghans. Though some of the details got muddled up and they didn't know which war was the first Afghan war and which was the second war, but the names were remembered. Since the British have gone, we've had the Russians. We saw them off too, but not before they bombed many of the houses in the village. And he pointed at the ridge behind with all the mud brick houses all bombed out. "We are the roof of the world," said Anwar Khan. "From here you can control and watch everywhere." "Afghanistan is like a crossroads," agreed one of the elders. "Every nation that comes to power has to come here. But we do not have the strength to control our own destiny. Our fate is determined by our neighbors." "Last month," said one of the elders, "some American officers called us to a hotel in Jalalabad for a meeting. One of them asked me, 'Why do you hate us?' And I replied, 'Because you blow down our doors, enter our houses, pull our women by the hair, and kick our children. We cannot accept this. We will fight back, and we will break your teeth, and when your teeth are broken, you will leave, just as the British left before you. It is just a matter of time.'" "What did he say to that?" I asked. He turned to his friend and said, "If the old men are like this, what will the young ones be like?" In truth, all the Americans here know their game is over. It's just the politicians who deny it. "This is the last days of the Americans," said Anwar Khan Jagdalik. "Next, it will be China." Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, William, for a wonderful keynote. I just have to make a very, very important announcement. And I have the moral and the professional duty to pass on the audience responsibility on to you. There will be a huge crowd, and we will be, our volunteers, our young volunteers will be politely requesting, if a room is full, for no more. I request and urge everyone to please respect that. We do not want a situation in hand which could be, Khuda na khasta, similar to what happened in a music concert in Lahore. So please be patient. If you are really, really interested in any of the sessions, time yourself better and be there so that you are able to attend it. You will be politely asked, if the room is full to its capacity, to attend another session. Please cooperate. Thank you very much. Have a fantastic day. Have a fantastic festival. Thank you very, very much.
I performed last year also with Guru Shima ji, and it's always an honor to perform at the Karachi Literature Festival. It's a big honor for us, and I'd like to thank Miss Amina Said and the British Council to give us this chance to perform here. Since we're young artists and we're just trying to experiment ourselves with our art and what we're going to do today. Today we're going to do a piece by Faiz. It's called Sham. It's a Nazm by Faiz. I'd like to introduce quickly all my performers to you. Carol Noronha, vocalist and pianist. Sarah Heather, lead female vocalist. S.N. Bari, the music director. Shahid Rahman, the rhythmic guitarist. Zishan Pervez, the bassist. And Abdul Aziz Qazi, the percussionist, and Sabiha Zia, my co-dancer. And I've choreographed the dance, and I'm performing also. So it's just an experiment. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoy. Thank you.